Welcome to the Butterfly Tribe, where independent minds gather and sovereign voices are heard. This is a space where truth is not silenced, perspectives are valued, and every voice matters. Free from judgment, free from stigma, united through awareness. Welcome home, Butterfly. We've been expecting you.
So even though they may question the system, if doing so is going to challenge their security, they're just going to keep their mouths shut. I think the COVID vaccine was a perfect example of that. A lot of people who maybe didn't want to take it, took it. But it was my sovereignty to decide, in the face of all of that criticism from other people and all of the noise from the media, that you should be doing this, that you're a bad person if you don't take it. My sovereignty was to say, no, I'm not taking it because I don't feel it's necessary.
And this also proved which people were the rebels and which people were the followers. And most of them are still followers, are still sheep, with all due respect. Welcome back to Tribe Radio, where we explore freedom, sovereignty, transformation, and what it truly means to live an authentic life. Today's guest is someone whose work has challenged thousands of people to question the invisible systems shaping their lives. Joe Barnes is a best-selling author, speaker, and performance coach, best known for his book, Escape the System, a powerful exploration of how modern society conditions people into conformity, comfort, and dependency while disconnecting them from their true potential. Joe's message is simple yet profound. Most people are living according to scripts they never consciously chose. The path to freedom begins by questioning those scripts and reclaiming ownership of your mind, your life, and your future. A few months ago, I created a short video on my Instagram about Joe's work that unexpectedly went viral. That video sparked a connection between us, and today I'm honored to welcome him to Tribe Radio. Joe, welcome to the Butterfly Tribe.
Thanks, Robin. I've been looking forward to this.
So have I. Joe, before we talk about escaping the system, I'd love to start with your story. Who was Joe Barnes before the book, before the coaching, and before the message?
So, it's funny, it been in my mind for a while to do it. I think at the age of 22, I first had the idea of writing the book, and prior to that, I was at university studying for a politics degree. And Joe Barnes during that period was a very lost and confused person. I was confused in the sense that I felt trapped. I couldn't see a way out of this path that was predestined. It almost felt predestined for me. I come from a relatively wealthy family. Both my parents were lawyers. I did well at school. I went to university. I was supposed to follow in that trajectory. I was not liking that trajectory or path. And I was thinking, well, what else can I do? But I couldn't see any options at all. So before the book, I was very lost and confused. I had a lot of personal issues. And it was only when I was 22 and I discovered a different influential book, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, that I started to turn my life around. And then I thought, hey, I could add my own, I feel like I've got a lot to say, a lot to write about. I could add my own input to this, put my own voice out there and write a book. It took me a long time to write this book because I was still quite full of self-doubt. But that was what was happening to me before, and that was the original idea straight out after university. It then took another 10 years before the book was actually published. So you see, I had to work through quite a few self-doubts. I also established myself as a tennis coach and a hypnotherapist, so I was doing work in that respect. So that's who I was before the book came out.
Okay, yeah, it's all part of the journey. It's an initiation, as I see, the path of suffering. Because that's what gives us eventually the knowledge to create, and in your case, that's writing a book that I really resonated with. And was there a specific moment when you realized something about society that wasn't adding up?
I think subconsciously, yes, probably in my mid to late teenage years. But then I watched the film The Matrix, the first one,
Oh
and
yeah.
that came out 1999, so I was 19 at the time. And in the film, the character Morpheus says something to Neo. He says, "You've known it all your life, but you can't quite put your finger on it. There's something wrong with reality." And I just felt like an electric bolt went through me in the cinema, and I realized, yeah, there is something very wrong with reality. And I'd not actually consciously realized that until I heard those words in the film, but that broke through everything and kind of woke me up and made me realize, actually, yes, all these things that I do feel are wrong with reality, as in we're basically wage slaves. At the time, quite influential to me at the time socially was the way everybody in this country, in the UK, was almost addicted to alcohol. They couldn't have fun without getting drunk. These kinds of things. It made me realize, oh shit! It gave a voice to what I was feeling subconsciously, that there was something wrong to reality. And then as I got older, I explored this potential that, well, actually, maybe we can shape and create new realities. I always thought you just had to accept the reality you're given. And it was only after reading various other books and doing my own thinking that I realized, no, we're not obliged to accept reality. Most people do accept the mainstream reality, but you actually have a choice, and you can create your own far more exciting, far more meaningful reality. And if enough people did that, then we'd change the world for better.
Oh yeah, for sure. I completely agree with that standpoint. And what's so beautiful is that to observe that we live in a time sort of a revelation. People are waking up now, much more in numbers than they used to. Also, probably because of all the shock therapy that people may experience right now. The whole card house is falling on itself. And yes, I believe The Matrix is definitely one of the first movies I also watched when I was younger. I'm 35. How old are you?
Just turned. I think with this funny thing, Robin, I said it to you at the time, we have the same birthday, 19th of March, right?
Oh, that's awesome. You're Pisces
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're both born on the same day, except I think I'm born 11 years before you. So, yeah, just
Okay.
turned 46.
Yeah. Well, everything happens for a reason, brother. And you're soon to be a father as well.
Yeah, that's right. It's about 3 weeks'
Congratulations.
time. Thank you.
Awesome. How does that feel?
I'm quite excited now. I was a little apprehensive. I mean, I really want it to happen, don't get me wrong. And we've tried a long time for it to happen, so we're super grateful and happy about it. But I was a little apprehensive, I love kids. I work with kids, or have done, for a long time. But I don't know about babies. So I'm like, how am I going to handle a baby? But I'm quite excited now.
Awesome, I can imagine. Okay, well, I have a whole list of questions for this episode, and we will go towards chapters that will go from the programming until the enlightenment, transformation, and the conclusion. So, looking back, what beliefs did you have to destroy before becoming the person you are today?
I think my own limitations. I was always pretty good at seeing through the society's programming. I always had a kind of gut instinct for that when I was being fed something that wasn't necessarily the case or didn't have to be followed. The beliefs I had to break through were my own limiting beliefs, because I always felt, and I feel, I don't know whether you ever have this experience, Robin, or people watching this, we're just one individual against this mighty, or we're led to believe this mighty system with all these institutions. Who are we to think that we could do something great or be something special or even make any kind of difference? So I struggled with that at first. I felt like I've got all these big dreams, I've got all these things I want to say, and yet I mean, come on, Joe, you're just this one guy from South Nutfield in England who, you might be crazy. That was something I thought to myself quite a lot.
But that's the
I,
program, right? So that's
yeah,
that, 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 that. Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, it could be. It's like I could be crazy. I've got these ideas, but not many people seem to think the way that I think. And it was only once I published my book and started getting my message out there that I discovered, oh, actually, there's quite a few people that think the way I think or think the way we think. I mean, we're a minority, but it's a growing minority. So
Yeah.
it was really my own self-doubt that I had to overcome. And also, as you mentioned, yeah, that is a bit of conditioning from the system, that you are just a tiny individual, you're kind of irrelevant, you can't have any impact, you're a cog in the system. You've got to fit in and find your place and just follow the rules rather than think that you could do something different. So yeah, that was the conditioning I had to overcome.
Okay, so that was also like the greatest prison you had to escape within yourself, or is there something else that was even harder, maybe?
No, I'd probably say that, but then just self-doubt, really. Self-doubt
Yeah.
in terms of the conditioning I talked about, self-doubt in terms of, you know, stuff about myself. I thought that I maybe couldn't do it. That was, and just, I think at various points in my life I'd had a feeling of being trapped. I felt trapped at university. I remember walking up and down the corridors where I lived in the halls of residence, and I just felt a bit like the walls were caving in on me, and I had no options. So
Yeah.
I think that was quite a bit of conditioning, that there are no opportunities out there in the world, that it's just this small box that you have to fit into and live your life within, rather than realizing, which I know now, and my beliefs have changed now, that the world is full of opportunity. That is one of my core beliefs now. I have about 4 core beliefs that I frequently repeat to myself just to get myself in the right mindset. And one of them is the world is full of opportunity. But because before I was believing that, I felt that there was basically no, you're in a tiny box and you're confined to it.
Yeah. So there are a lot of people that are still trapped within the frame of thinking we have to see in order to believe, but it's actually the opposite. And that's where we see opportunities. And just to react on what you just said about doubt, I think a lot of entrepreneurs experience this daily, and it's I also experience this every day, actually. And it's an ongoing struggle with ourselves. Because what I believe is that we grow towards the best version of ourselves every day, But we have to do it constantly, and we will go into that in this conversation. But what was the fear that kept you trapped the longest?
Fear that kept me trapped the longest. That I think that it was the truth that the world I feared, the system, the world that I was being told I had to conform to, was real. It was true that I had to do that. Now, I don't mean that it's not real in the sense that a lot of people go along with the system and live their lives by the rules of the system. But my point is it's one of many possible realities. Now, I felt trapped because at sometimes I thought this is the only reality. It's like my dreams of being an author are never going to work out. I'm not going to be able to make a success doing it. I'm just stuck with this very boring, draining reality, and I'm going to have to accept that. I think that was my biggest fear, but fortunately, a fear that I've overcome.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's why we're here as well, having this conversation together. So yeah, your book is called Escape the System, but let's define this clearly for our viewers as well. When you use the term system, what exactly are you referring to?
Okay, so for the purpose of the book, I basically say it's a world you're led to believe in by your parents, teachers, the media, bosses, your friends, your colleagues. It's the idea that the world works a certain way, that you have to conform to the accepted way of behaving, and working, get a 9 to 5 job, get married, have kids, and that there's not that the idea that we talked about earlier, that you're just one small individual, that you can't really do, you have very little room to make any impact at all. So it's this idea that the world is a certain way, and you just have to adapt to it and find your place within it. So that's really what I wanted. That's how I frame the system in the book, because a lot of this is about your mind and your consciousness, and realizing that, yeah, a lot of people live their lives that way, but you don't have to. You have an option as to how you want to live your life. You don't have to buy into that. Okay, I interact with this system in the sense that I pay my taxes, but I do that more because I want to keep the system off my back. I don't want them interfering. Have your money. I'm now going to go and live my life, and you're not going to interfere in any other way. I haven't got married. That's not because I don't believe in love or having a family. It's because I just see it as another way for the system to interfere in your life. So I try and keep that to an absolute minimum. I work for myself. Along with the book writing, I do, as I mentioned, I do hypnotherapy. I also do some tennis coaching. So I work for myself. I don't want the system involved in that. So I try to minimize its impact as much as possible. And obviously I don't break the law, because I think every single law is correct, is because I don't want, again, the system interfering in my life, me potentially going to jail or something like that. Not that I'm not a bad guy. I don't do criminal activities. But I do say in my book that sometimes, for moral reasons, it is right to break the law, and you've got to make that decision and do it. But on other occasions, I just try to keep the system out of my life as much as possible and live my own, defined and fun existence.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. And nowadays, everything we do, we risk breaking the law because they have created so many laws. My journey started with sovereignty, and I studied a lot about law in general, and also the Zesty Act of 1666. I don't know if you have ever heard of that, but the straw man theory, etc., the persona that was created on our name, etc. So yeah, but let's see. Do you believe the system is intentionally designed to create conformity, or is it simply the natural result of how modern civilizations evolved?
That's a great question, Robin. I tend to think it's less... I do believe in some conspiracies, but I don't know if I believe in one big grand conspiracy with a designed system. I tend to believe this system is more run on greed and ignorance more than a plan. I don't actually think the elites are that clever, or as clever as they make themselves out to be able to orchestrate all of this. I think we could actually change it quite easily if enough people woke up and realized it. So no, I just think it's the way things evolve in terms of you've got to have a status quo to some degree. I understand that. If you didn't have any status quo at all, it would just be chaos all the time. And we've got to have a balance, You have a status quo. This is actually what I talk about in my latest book, The Rebel Code, how rebels are the ones who need to disrupt the status quo and create change. But you can't have that all the time because it's a bit too chaotic. So we need some kind of status quo, but the problem we have, Robin, is that too many people are obeying it. We need more agents of change and disruptors to come along and change things up so we can evolve and we can have less and less of the system influencing our lives. So while I definitely believe there are some conspiracies and the elites do whatever they can to hold on to their power, absolutely. I don't know how coordinated it all is, because if it was more coordinated, I think they would have greater power over us. I don't think we realize as individuals how much power we have and how quickly we could change this system. So
Yeah.
I did used to read quite a lot about David Icke. I presume you've heard of David Icke and read his books.
Yeah.
And yeah, very interesting research. And I agree with all the stuff he writes about when it comes to elites and the impact and the power of elites. But then he goes to a level further and says that fourth or fifth dimensional beings are actually, shape-shifting. They're lizards and they are the elites. I don't know if I believe that, because I feel if that was the case and humanity was actually under the control of these beings, I think their control over us would be a lot tighter than it currently is.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. And I think it's also important with all this information, overload of noise and information nowadays, that we stay sort of focused on what truly matters. I myself grew up in a family that taught me a lot about the agendas, the conspiracy, also the Jewish movement, what they actually intend to build to enslave humanity even further. And everything came out. And so it's important to know, but it takes away the focus of what matters, and that is taking your own responsibility and feeding your soul with wisdom, knowledge that then can be transformed into assets and freedom.
You more think that there is a big overarching conspiracy controlling us, a coordinated one.
Yeah, I definitely know. I don't want to say believe. I know that there are structures in today's society that have a lot to say, that have a lot of power. And most things we are fed on mainstream media is to divide us and to distract us. Because if we are busy fighting with each other, then we don't look up, right? We don't see who is actually there with the loop trying to burn our antennas off. And that's what I believe, and what I've experienced as well when I operated within the system. I have now learned to use my own voice and create my content, and now we started with the Butterfly Tribe or Tribe Radio because I see the value in sharing perspectives, so people can get inspired and also have another sound than only the noise of the mainstream media, because that's what keeps people numb, actually, with fear and also doubt, what we just said. So yeah, that's where I stand right now. But I don't have all the answers, and I continue growing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty similar. Actually, when you explain it like that, it's pretty similar to the way I see it. I think you know a little more of the details, as you said, about the act in 1666. And I was actually listening to an earlier interview of yours where you're talking about that. So that kind of information is useful and interesting. I take a more sort of, I guess it's vaguer and big picture of how this system, impacts our lives, what you can do about it to live a happier, more inspired life is sort of my angle. But when you mention what you're saying, I probably find myself nodding my head and agreeing.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, more of the belief system that you sort of expose, and this is super important because that's where we can start building. What I talk about is more outrageous, actually, and it is also part of the journey because awareness is important as well. But it's the first step, in my opinion. Exposing child trafficking and supremacist ideas about depopulating planet, blah blah blah. It's important to know, but then we move on. The caterpillar has to go in its chrysalis to do its introspection. That's where you help people, and that's where I really am keen to learn from you. So why do you think so many intelligent people never question the script they have been given within society?
That's interesting. I think, just going to shift between my two books, Escape the System and The Rebel Code, and talk about The Rebel Code here a little bit, because that book has a bit more of an explanation about this. So I think there are three types of people on the planet. You're either a leader, a follower, or a rebel. And the reason why so many intelligent people don't question the system is because they're probably leaders, and leaders benefit from the system. They are the ones who maintain the status quo. They are the ones who get all the perks and benefits from life being the way it is. So even if they may secretly question things and understand that there is something something foul at play within our societies, they're not going to challenge it, because it's making them wealthy. It's giving them status and power. So that's why they're not going to do it. Then you have the mass majority of people who are the followers. Again, they may question things. I don't think people are that dumb. I think quite a lot of people realize that to some extent we are trapped by these institutions, and more so trapped by the belief system that we buy into. But followers tend to live their lives quite scared. They're fearful. Their main drive and need is security. So even though they may question the system, if doing so is going to challenge their security, they're just going to keep their mouths shut, because they want as easy and safe a life as possible. So that just leaves people like you and me, Robin, the rebels, who do question it. They question the system like everybody else, but then they actually act on it and challenge it.
And it's a new way of leadership as well. We have to teach people how to become their own leaders, while being rebellious, of course, because we go against the status quo, let's say. But it's really interesting how you depicted this. Indeed, what I also have experienced as a content creator, for example, I was invited at some interviews in the Netherlands to talk about my perspectives and what is happening in the system, etc. And I talk about very controversial topics like, for example, Jewish supremacy. And these hosts at the end of the interview wouldn't dare publish the video, although it was very valuable and the conversation was awesome, But that's what I try to say here, is that these, let's say, leaders correct themselves. So they stay loyal to the prison and do not speak out when actually that is going to heal, Truth will always come out eventually. But it's very interesting to see that,
Yeah, because it benefits them, right? That's how they get their status, that's how they get their power and their money as well. So they may know that it's all bullshit, but they're going to defend it because they fear what the alternative might be if they're no longer in their positions of power.
Yeah, so in that way, comfort is actually counterproductive to our transformation, to freedom.
Yeah, well, comfort, yes, in every sense. Personally, we got to challenge our own limits and comfort zone. And then as a society, comfort, keeping things the way they are. It's, as I said, it's okay to have periods of stability, right? You can't have constant change and chaos all of the time. But we've had too long a period of the status quo just being followed. And now in 2026, and as you mentioned, it's been bubbling up. I think it's time for people to start challenging things. And, they can do that, challenge our institutions, or they can just do it on a personal level by following what they feel inspired to do. I think if every individual follows what they feel inspired to do, it's naturally going to challenge this system we have, because the system we have, I call it, it's an inspiration sucker. It drains the inspiration out of people. So one way you can make a sort of global or society change is just by being true to yourself, doing something as simple as that, and following your own path without even trying to be controversial. You're going to have a positive impact and create some kind of change.
Yeah, this will eventually create a butterfly effect, inspire others everywhere. What do you think are the strongest mechanisms that keep people obedient?
I would say, you know, I'm a hypnotherapist. I would say hypnosis, and this may sound a bit crazy, but listen to me. People get hypnotized, or people's beliefs form from three factors. It's hearing something from authority figure, hearing it with emotion, or that thing triggering some kind of emotion in you, and hearing it repetitively. And on top of that, when you're younger, you're a child, your brain's still developing, you're more suggestible. So we have been hypnotized as a humanity to believe certain ideas about how the world works, about ourselves, our place within it. And that is such a powerful tool for people to not realize their potential. We have limits. You know, our beliefs set our limits. And if we believe that I'm just one person, I'm pretty insignificant, I don't really have any particular talents, I'm not that lucky, then it confines you to a very small life. But if you start to realize that that's not actually the truth, it's just something you've been told either by your parents or through the school system or by the media, and it's just sunk into your mind because it's coming from authority figures, because you hear it so often, and because it makes some kind of emotional connection with you, then that's how you form a belief, and that's how that can end up limiting you. Now, it's your job, you go to whatever sources like you, the Butterfly Tribe, for example, my book, whatever it might be, to try and educate yourself on how do I break down this conditioning? How do I live in this world as a limitless person, where anything is possible and I can do anything? And maybe we can't fly without a plane, for example. Believing I can fly and levitate maybe isn't going to make me fly and levitate. But believing that I can do anything makes me a far more effective person than somebody who thinks there's not a whole lot I can do. I'm limited and trapped. So that, I think I answered your question in a roundabout sort of way.
Definitely, and it inspires me to ask another question, because we can maybe try to go to the source of the problem. How much of modern education teaches people what to think rather than how to think?
I think pretty much all of it does. I mean, there's useful, you're learning, and to some degree you're learning useful information and subjects, right? Chemistry, biology, physics, maths. This is good stuff to know. But it's the way you never get taught the bigger picture. Why is this useful? Or how is this going to be useful in your life? You just get taught a load of facts and information, and then most importantly told that there's a path you have to follow through life, right? The pressure to do well in exams. Well, why do I need to do well in exams? Well, you've got to go to this thing called university. Well, why have I got to go to university? Oh, because you need a qualification to get what you would call a good job. Well, what's a good job? A good job in the system's eyes is just something that makes you money. It's not something that is an expression of who you are. It's not necessarily something that's contributing to society, because actually a lot of our jobs in some way destroy society. So it's education is the beginning, the first step on that path of being taught this is the way you have to live your life and do your exams, university, job, etc., etc. So it's not that at school there is some useful information to learn, but I will tell my child, do well at school, learn the information, but realize that the path they tell you to walk is not the only path. There's so much more you can do, and life doesn't have to be the way the school institution tells you it has to be.
Yeah, and people stay stuck in this survival mode of I have to make money because else I can pay my rent or pay my taxes, or feed my children. So, do you think fear is a primary currency of this control?
Yes, it's the number one. It is the most important. Is because is that what happens as you become an adult, or even younger, late teenager, you start making decisions based on fear rather than what inspires you. And
Your
you are
heart.
afraid, as you said, of not being able to pay the bills. And that makes you say, oh, okay, I'll take this shit. I'll accept this shit job because, I need, I've got to pay the bills. I've got to make money. I won't follow my dreams. I won't act on that idea to start a new business or do whatever it is you feel inspired to do because you're constantly told, well, don't do that because what if it goes wrong and what if you won't be able to put food on your table or pay the bills, etc. So this fear, it's very pervasive. It gets through most people's minds, and they end up making their life decisions based on it. And I say in one of my books, make decisions based on what your heart is telling you to do. Don't allow fear to dictate your life.
Yeah, and that is sometimes difficult, and I say this from my own experience, especially when you are occupied with surviving. For me, it started when I started living minimalistic. In other words, my life wasn't so expensive anymore, so I didn't need money to live, I lived in a tent. I lived in a camper van on a boat, and since the age of 19, I've been traveling, and now all over the world. I'm right now in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And now I have created wealth for myself also in money. But that was only possible because I had the time in nature and with myself and being alone. I've lived most of my life as a hermit, to really understand myself and to find my purpose as a man, and read a lot of books. And this is how I became more intelligent around money, around energy, around attraction, etc. You name it. And that's what a lot of people don't have time for, to invest in themselves.
It's so interesting you said that because that is always an option available. People think they don't have any options. I have to do this job I don't like to pay the bills. Well, you just proved that, no, you don't. You said you lived in a tent, you lived in a camper van, you lived minimalistically, and you had, I'm guessing, you still had fun moments during that time, you still felt inspiration, your quality of life was still maybe quite good, even though you did what a lot of people fear doing. And I don't also want to make it out that everybody has to quit their job. It's not the case. You've got to find the right balance for you. But to say that it's impossible because you have to pay bills is not actually true, because you've just given it yourself. Your own story shows that that's not the case.
Yeah, and again, that's a belief that people then have. Yeah, beautiful. I wanted to go towards the chapter freedom right now. Because we were naturally gravitating towards that already. So one of the themes we explore frequently within our tribe is sovereignty. What does sovereignty mean to you?
So to me, it's having the power to make your own decisions, understanding that there's going to be a lot of outside influence, a lot of noise coming in, saying this is what you should do, this is the way you should live your life, or this is what you should do in this moment. But you have to understand that you've got to, or you do have the power. A lot of people think they don't have the power. Let me give you an example. I think an example explains this best, Robin. I don't know whether we're allowed to talk about this. I think we are. But COVID, can
Everything,
we talk about COVID a little bit?
of course. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
please.
So I think the COVID vaccine was a perfect example of that, sovereignty, self-sovereignty. And a lot of people who maybe didn't want to take it took it because they thought they had no other option. They were pressured to. They were, in some cases, they told you have to have it for a certain job or you have to have it to travel. So I didn't want it, not necessarily because I thought it was going to kill me. I know there have been some bad side effects from it, and I feel a great deal of sympathy from people who experienced that. But other members of my family had it, they were fine. And everybody was telling me, oh, you need to get it, you've got to make other people safe. And I said, no, it's not necessary. I do my own thinking. I know that COVID, okay, it's worse than the flu, but it's not that much worse than the flu. It doesn't require a youngish, healthy person to take a vaccine. Maybe if I was 80 years old, I'd have a different opinion and maybe I would have taken it. But it was my sovereignty to decide in the face of all of that criticism from other people and all of the noise from the media that you should be doing this, that you're a bad person if you don't take it. My sovereignty was to say, no, I'm not taking it because I don't feel it's necessary. And that's my choice. And you shouldn't be trying to impose a decision on me. We should all respect each other's decisions. I don't go up to you because you took the vaccine and say you're an idiot for doing that. I keep my mouth shut. But for me, don't come along and tell me that I'm an idiot or that I'm harming other people because I don't want to take this vaccine, because I value, my own health and my belief that I don't actually think COVID is that dangerous. So I don't need a vaccine for something that in my situation as a healthy person is, so what if I caught it? I think I probably did catch it. It did nothing to me. So I hope that example kind of demonstrates sovereignty in action, because that's what I'm trying to get. That's what sovereignty means to me.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, so it is something within. Yeah, and it's beautiful that you bring up COVID, because for me that was also a profound chapter. This is where I started to speak out more about the system and how the butterfly tribe was born eventually as well. And I think it was a chapter in humanity that was actually very necessary for people to wake up, to get out of this hypnosis that you also spoke about. And this also proved which people were the rebels and which people were the followers. And most of them are still followers, are still sheep, with all due respect. For me, it was a moment where I realized suddenly that, wow, are there so many people in the world that do not see that this is a fucking hoax? I was stunned by it. Like, no one could even touch my body, No way, that's not gonna happen for me. That was just something in my DNA that said no.
Yeah.
And there were so many people standing in line and completely agreeing with the program.
It made me, I don't know how about you, Robert, it made me quite sad in a way, because I thought, is that all it takes, for you to be so, for you to conform? You just need to be made to feel afraid by constant news telling you deadly, deadly, everybody dying. You can't think for yourself. You can't look around and see the people you know and realize, hey, everybody's okay, actually. There's not really that much of a problem. So I felt quite sad and I thought, God, this is how, things happened in the past where, mass populations were coerced into doing bad things. You just need to make a population, a society scared enough, and they'll pretty much agree to anything. So I felt a bit sad, but then I think, as you said, some people did wake up. some people challenged it, and I wonder if something like that happened again, whether it would be different, whether more people would challenge it and say, look, we're not accepting this anymore. We're not going to be locked down. We're not going to be forced to take things against our will. I don't know. What do you think? If something like that happened again, do you think the government control would be as effective as it was before, or do you think you'd see more rebellion now?
Well, I'm getting goosebumps when you're asking me all these questions. There are several perspectives from which we can look at this. One is, I believe that the vaccines have been designed to numb people, and there is a depopulation program going on for decades now, even maybe centuries, against a specific group of people. And the problem with those who have taken the vaccines, especially if you have taken several, what I noticed is that these people become very asocial. In other words, it's difficult to get to them, like spiritually, like with on a soul level, when you have a conversation with these people. And so I see that as an obstacle, let's say, towards a higher state of consciousness and awareness for these people. Maybe they have already lost a part of their soul in that regard. But for others, it is, because it was so traumatizing, a form of, like I said before, shock therapy that they needed to really wake up. Suddenly they see the world for what it is. And that is a blessing, because it created a big movement on the planet right now. And also, we can also look at the frequency of the planet, with the planets that are positioned in a way, Aquarius, etc. So there's a lot going on already on our planet. And so maybe this is also a fruit of that bigger picture of what is happening in the cosmos. But it is a beautiful moment where, in time, where people are divided, but then also find each other. Like, for example, we have found each other right now having this conversation, and that's what I try to do with the Butterfly Tribe, is to bring like-minded people together, because I believe that when that happens, we can create more efficiently communities and really step out of that system, and then create a system in which we can then thrive as free human beings, instead of the slaves that we were born into being. Yeah.
Yeah. So you think in some ways, yeah, I see what you're saying. So in some ways, there would be a little more resistance to it if something like that happened again. Because more
especially
people
with
have,
war now,
yeah.
people are very fearful right now. But who knows? We will see. I hope that a lot of people will wake up, but I'm skeptic about that, because if they made that choice, then they will probably make that choice again. Yeah. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, but I have another question regarding sovereignty for you. How is sovereignty different from freedom?
That's a good question. So sovereignty is, going back to the example I gave you with the vaccine, the choice over what you do with yourself, your body, and or your being, and not letting other people interfere with that. Freedom is more something so sovereignty is something that should always be there. It's something you should have all of the time and not let anyone take away. Freedom is something you build, and you want to try and build freedom into your life as much as you possibly can. So freedom, for example, I think one of the biggest steps to doing that is being able to make money in a way which is enjoyable for you, because if you don't, then you're not free for 40 hours of the week, or however long, 50 hours of the week, commuting as well. So you're effectively you're in economic servitude. Okay, it's not, to call it a condition of slavery is not entirely accurate, because that would be an insult to the people who are in true slavery. But it's a lesser form of it. You have to go somewhere you don't want to be, do things you don't want to do. That is not a free life. So freedom is something you build for yourself. Sovereignty is something you have, and you shouldn't let anyone take away from you. So the whole purpose really of Escape the System is to deal with freedom and how to build more and more freedom into your life until you have, I don't know, 90% freedom, 100% freedom. You're in charge of your time. You get to decide what you do almost each and every day, and nobody else. You're not doing things because doing it for the money, because you need to make money, or because you feel you need to please another person. So freedom is something you build. Sovereignty is something you have. It's intrinsic. It's your right.
Well said, brother. It's time is the most valuable thing, I always say, that we have in our lives. And if we look at the word freedom, it is like a kingdom. And so freedom is actually a kingdom we are building, in which we have all the time of the world at our own disposal, instead of that we are, giving it to a system that keeps us trapped. Really interesting. Great. Let's see. Can someone become truly sovereign while remaining inside existing institutions and structures?
That's another good question, because I gave that example of paying taxes earlier. Are you sovereign if you pay tax? That's a question, and you might technically say, well, no, you're not, because you're giving some of your money to that system. It's taking your sovereignty away. However, I tend to look at it, could you find an isolated wilderness to live in where you didn't have to pay any tax at all? Yeah, you probably could. If you planned it well enough and you did your research, you could probably do that. Would you want to do that? Maybe. But then maybe you like some of the advantages of being, slightly within the system, but then mentally completely without. So I like that advantage, because I get to do some cool, inspiring things. So teaching kids tennis is fun to me. Helping people with my hypnotherapy and helping them overcome their limits or bad habits, etc. Trying to make an impact, having an impact with my books and communicate. That's all stuff I like to do, which, I don't know, I could still write books if I was a hermit and living in isolation, but it would cut me off. I love playing sports as well, so I play tennis regularly as I compete. I still compete, although in older age groups. I couldn't do all of that fun stuff. So I think there's a slight price to pay in terms of, I'm not 100% sovereign because I pay my taxes, but I'd rather just pay that small fee and then say, right, that's the system interfering in my life. That's a small bit that it does. On the large bit, it's not going to interfere, and I'm going to go and now use it to my advantages and have fun. So I think technically you can't be sovereign if you're engaged in the system on a technical level, but in reality, I don't feel too much like the system is encroaching on my life. I have 90% sovereignty, 85% sovereignty, and for me that's probably enough. It doesn't feel overbearing, it doesn't feel intolerable.
Yeah, it's all about balance. And what I always say is we have one foot in the system and one foot outside of the system. At least you are still in control, and that's what a big part of sovereignty is about as well, And let's see. What areas of life must a person master before they can call themselves free? We go
Okay, so
towards discipline now.
yeah. So I would say, well, that's a good, that's a good. There are two levels to answer that question because there's the personal level, mastering your own mind, your own beliefs, because you could have unlimited amount of money, you could be a billionaire, yet you could still be trapped by your own impulses, your own anger, your own negative thoughts, your own limiting beliefs. So it's perfectly possible that you can be a billionaire and yet you're not free because you have a mind or a belief system that works against you. So you have to work on yourself in terms of I talked a little bit earlier about having a limitless outlook. Then you have to work on your own, potentially your own issues that you had growing up from childhood. If you're overly angry about certain things, if you find it hard to make connections with other people. So that's all of the personal work. Then you have to do the practical work, which is in terms of, can you set up a way of getting an income that isn't dependent on you giving yourself up to some corporation you hate or some company you hate? Can you rely on yourself for an income? That's a level of freedom. Or maybe using your example when you were younger, maybe you don't even feel you need it, and you do have the ability to go off into a natural place to live in a tent, etc. And if that's the case for you, if you're happy doing that, then why not? So it's two levels of freedom. It's personal mastery, and then it's being able to create a living for yourself independent of a company or a corporation or work which would which would make you feel stressed, bored, which isn't your life purpose. So those are the two levels in my mind.
Okay, interesting. And how important do you think financial independence is in the pursuit of sovereignty?
It's again, this is such a nuanced theme because you could, financial independence just simply means you're free from want, wanting
Yeah.
stuff, needing things, and you can live off the land, off grid, and barely have any net worth at all, yet be financially independent. So it's a difficult question. Otherwise, financial independence could mean, the classical definition, being a multimillionaire. Once you achieve that status, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. That gives you sovereignty. Or if your needs and your financial desires aren't that great, you can do it with a far smaller sum. Maybe a couple of 100,000 is enough for you to be financially independent because you manage your money well, because you have a minimalist lifestyle. So it really depends on the individual. So it's not for me to say to one person, you need X amount of money to be financially independent. I don't think that's the case. I think it depends on what inspires you, what your plan is for your life.
Yeah. I've read a lot of books about money and how it works and the mindset you should adopt in order to attract money and create wealth for yourself. Money itself should never be a pursuit, because then you say to the universe and to your own nervous system that you are in lack of that money. And so this is what you will attract. You will chase it. So what's important, especially for entrepreneurs like us, is that we stay focused on the mission, on the passion. And the money and the wealth that we earn is a byproduct of that. And so then we have more time as well, But in that regard, responsibility plays a big role, don't you think?
Responsibility as in being responsible with the money you have, or something else?
In creating a sovereign and free life, let's say.
like personal response. You mean personal responsibility then?
Yeah,
Yeah,
responsibility and discipline.
yes. It all comes down to you. You can't blame other people. You can't make excuses. And as much as the system does influence your life, you can't even blame the system. You've got to say, it's on me to make these changes, to be careful with my money, or to develop my level of skills and knowledge to the point where I can monetize something I do. Yeah, I do try and, no matter what happens to me, I try and take responsibility for everything I do and say, well, okay, even if I feel something happened to me unfairly, I a few years ago, I have a head coach position at a tennis club. So that means I organise everything and I have the main role. And it felt like without telling me, the committee on the club brought somebody else in. And I thought, this is really unfair. They've treated me badly here. But I said, no, I've got to I've got to look at my role here. I've got to be responsible for this situation and say, well, how did I allow this to happen? And then I thought, okay, well, yeah, maybe I was focusing too much on my writing. Maybe I wasn't giving enough time to that. And because of that, I allowed this outside agent to come in and almost take over what I thought was mine. So even though I felt I'd been unfairly treated, I still had to be responsible in that situation and say, look, what could I have done better? When I realized that maybe I could have done something better, I changed that, and now I have my old position back, and it's not a problem. So I try to be I try to always say, ownership. You own everything. I think there's a book called Extreme Ownership by some Navy SEAL guy called Jocko Willink. I didn't think the book was that great, but I love the title, Extreme Ownership, just taking ownership for everything.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, accountability, and that's something we don't see within the system. Everyone hides behind masks, behind status, etc. Especially those who are on the top, like presidents and everything. They
Yeah.
create situations that are never accountable, but they have a big impact on the world. Um, and if we go back to our viewers, and people in general who want to create a life of freedom. Why do so many people say they want that freedom while unconsciously avoiding the responsibilities that come with it?
I think it goes back to what you said earlier about fear. It's everybody wants the freedom, but they're scared to take the steps that would allow them to get it. Scared of what other people are going to think of them if they suddenly say, hey, I've got this idea of starting my own business, or I might quit my job and go and pursue this business. They're afraid that people around them, and most likely they will say, oh, you're crazy. Why would you do that? Why would you give up all of this security that you have? Why would you give up your monthly paycheck? It probably won't work. 9 out of 10 businesses fail, new businesses fail. That's what we hear all the time. So it's fear. Everybody wants this sovereignty and freedom, but it's only reserved for the people who are brave enough to act on their instincts rather than talking themselves out of their desire for freedom by saying, oh, it's never going to work. Everybody around me tells me it's a bad idea, or they should think about my security, and convincing themselves that it can't happen for them. So that, I think, is why people don't reach out and grab their freedom, which is available to all of us. It's because they allow fear to dominate their mind and their decisions.
Yeah, and that's why probably a minority becomes actually free and sovereign at the end. Yeah. And do you think freedom is something we achieve or something we remember?
We remember or achieve. I think it's something, this goes back earlier to my point about freedom and sovereignty. It's something you build more and more of.
Yeah.
And something you remember, I guess, in the sense that, I remember feeling very free as a child. That was great. I didn't have all this mental pollution in my head coming in, about the world, etc., about how life has to be, about how the world can be quite a mean and evil place at a time. I remember living what felt like in my own little world as a child. I liked my first school. It was great. I had friends, and I remember that feeling of freedom was freedom that to just live in the moment, never have to think about I've got to do these responsibilities. I have these responsibilities and this and that to do. So I do remember that freedom, and I have fond memories of that.
I was going to ask you, by the way, we are 1 hour in. Do you still have the energy and the willingness to continue?
It's up to you. I'm enjoying it. So whatever you think is best.
Okay, awesome. Great, thank you. Well, then we can go towards transformation. Like a lot of people want change, but few seem willing to transform. What does genuine transformation actually require?
That's a good question. It takes a lot of reflection. I think my number one recommendation, the number one thing which has been most useful to me is journaling. Once a week I will write down my thoughts and try to be my own biggest critic. Try to look at as objectively as possible. I know it's not as trying to look at yourself and reflect on yourself is quite difficult because there's always going to be a level of bias, but you've got to try to look at yourself from outside yourself and say, am I living up to my ideals? Could I have listened to that person made a criticism of me in a relationship or work-wise, whatever it might be? Did they have a point? Or is this a case where I've got to stay true to my beliefs and principles and be firm? Or is there something I need to learn from what they're saying? So journaling for me has been huge when it comes to transformation. And I've done it for 24 years. I've been doing that, writing once a week, just reflecting on things and how I'm doing in my journey. Because without self-reflection and without taking sometimes an uncomfortable look at yourself, I don't think you can really transform, because otherwise you can just be too easy on yourself or take pity on yourself or just blame the system. We're talking about the system and we both know it's real and how it impacts people, but ultimately you can't blame it. You've got to do the work yourself, and for me the best way of transforming is journaling.
Beautiful. Yeah, it inspires me so much when you were explaining this, because what I experienced, especially in relationships with women, most women, but I think also guys, most people find it hard when they are confronted with their own lacks. And within a relationship, it's natural to be a mirror for one another. I'm very aware most of the time of what happens within me because I've done the work. And I'm also very aware of what happens in someone else's nervous system because I'm very sensitive. And in that regard, I become very triggering for people most of the time. And what I noticed is exactly what you said, is that a majority will flee from that feeling of guilt and uncertainty, while it's actually an invitation to go deeper and try to heal that trauma or a feeling of jealousy or hate or whatever, It's a troll. It's a troll inside that is screaming, who wants attention. And this is where most of the relationships break up for me as well. Like most of the women, they flee from me because of this. but then I'm also very ambitious and always focused on my mission, etc. And then there's something else I wanted to go towards that you also inspired me in this explanation is journaling. I noticed that these last couple of weeks, 3 weeks, I haven't been able to sleep properly. So I go to bed around, let's say, 11. Normally I do 10. And then I'm awake because I'm constantly thinking about all the stuff that I'm doing with the tribe and the inspiration as well and what I'm building, etc. An entrepreneur's mind, right? And I'm awake until 4 o'clock in the morning, and then the next morning it's very difficult to function normally. And I've had this for 3 weeks. And yesterday, I think it was, I started to write down everything that was on my mind. And suddenly my brain just went out and I could sleep. It's like a brain dump, but it's crazy that it works that way.
It's no accident. That's no accident at all, because I one of the things I do with hypnotherapy is help people with insomnia. I've experienced it before. I mean, at least you've had the good kind of insomnia. It's because you're so inspired and your mind's so alive that you just got all these ideas and you've got to get them out, or you want to take action on them. A lot of people, it's stressed thoughts going through their head. What I've got to do
I also had stress, of course. It's a mix of both, but yeah.
But you're right. Then yes, that's not a surprise to me that you managed to write them down. And when your mind is clear, your body relaxes. It's because when your mind is active and it's putting you in alert mode, your conscious mind is operating, and you've just got to, once you learn how to, either by writing down, or even I can do it now, if I get up in the night to go to the toilet, I just switch my conscious mind off. I just go to the toilet, get straight back into bed, fall asleep, because I'm not going to start engaging in thoughts. I'll just be drowsy, and because as soon as the mind starts getting active, that's when you can then spend hours and hours just lying in bed.
Yeah, especially with a visionary's mind.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And why do most development journeys fail, do you think?
Why do most development journeys fail? Probably not giving yourself enough time. That's the key. There's a famous quote. I don't know whether it was Tony Robbins or he copied it from somebody else, who said, people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. We think in terms of a year, and if I'm not reached a level of enlightenment, or if I've not changed my career and I've got this in my life, if I've not found my dream man or woman, then what's the point, in a year? But a year is not a lot of time, and your journey, it's a lifelong. Think of it differently when it comes to your own development. This is not, get to a certain place as quick as you can. Even if you get to that place, the journey still continues. So your development as a person, spiritually, mentally, even physically, is lifelong. You've got you're looking at it the wrong way. If you are interested in your own personal development and you stop doing it because you think things aren't happening quick enough, you're looking at it the wrong way, because you've got to be doing it. It's from now until the day you die. Your development continues.
Yeah, and it's a logic reflection of the system, actually, because everyone wants quick success, become rich quick with crypto, use a Tinder app to have sex quickly with a hot chick, That's how people consume one another as well, and it is not at all a disciplined way of building yourself, right?
Yeah, it's the wrong. You're right. That adds to it. All the messages we get from society are that you can have everything now. And then maybe you're disappointed if you engage on this, spiritual development of yourself, personal development of yourself, and the changes, okay, they're occurring, but they're feeling like they're quite slow. then if you take that societal attitude of this should be happening now, then yeah, maybe it can make you give up. But you shouldn't, because you get so much from on on being conscious of and working towards your own development. It's such a great way to live. You probably agree with me, Robin, that it's, you learn so much, you improve so much, you you can feel more. Life just becomes better and better when you are willing to put in the time to work on yourself.
Yeah, quality wise, and like we really overnieuw. We really start to understand ourselves from a very deep level, um, and that's beautiful because when you know yourself through and through, then it's very difficult to be blown away by a circumstance that happens in our life, because we feel safe within ourselves. You know, our body is our temple, and we are the soul. Are you religious, by the way? Do you
No,
believe in
no,
God?
I
No.
don't have any. I don't follow a religion. No. Um, I would say I've had spiritual experiences, but I just can't define them in any way to say that yeah, I've never really been a Christian. I pray every other night, but I don't really know who I pray to. It may sound crazy, but I still do
Be
it.
careful.
Um, so I believe there's a spirit, spirit running throughout the earth, throughout the planets, throughout the universe, and you can tap into that spirit, and that spirit will tell you to do certain things. But beyond that, I don't know how I'd define that as Christianity or Islam, as Muhammad or Jesus. I don't know. Is the answer to that?
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe it's the Holy Spirit. Who knows?
Yeah.
Um, what role has suffering played in your own awakening?
Um, I think it's everything. I think it's what's led to my own awakening. I think that's the case with everybody. Suffering, as horrible as it is, it makes you ask questions. It makes you look for solutions and answers and ways out. So if I hadn't suffered during my teenage years, then I don't think I'd have had an awakening. And any ongoing suffering that I do experience, which is much less than I did in the past, it still makes me aware that there's still things I need to improve on and work on.
Do you have an example of what you endured?
Yeah, so suffering in the past would have been, loneliness. I think has been my main suffering throughout my entire, from the age of 11 onwards when I changed schools. That is the thing that I've suffered the most. There's so many different types of suffering, but loneliness for me, it's maybe I'm a specialist in that, and it's as a result of that, I've had to try and understand my place in the world. The question was, why do I feel so different? Why do I not fit in? Why am I spending so much time on my own? Which in some ways has its upsides, but in some ways a lot of downsides. We are social beings. And as much as alone time is healthy, too much alone time is unhealthy. So in trying to answer that, in experiencing that suffering of being alone, and trying to answer the question, why am I feeling this way? Why am I this way? I've understood that actually my path is not the path of 90% of people. It's actually pushing me in a different direction, to be the person who asks questions that maybe other people don't ask, and then try to present a path out of a conventional way of living, and hence all of my books are a result of that.
Yeah, beautiful. And I've started to see it that way as well. It's actually a privilege that we can experience this loneliness, because from this loneliness, a vast force of creation is awakening within us that a lot of people do not or will never experience because they do not have the guts, the bravery to be alone, you know?
Yeah, there's a poem by Charles. Have you heard of Charles Bukowski?
I've heard of him, yes.
Yeah, a really good poem. What's it called? I can't remember. Through the fire, I think it's called. And he's talking about the experiences that people like us, the butterfly tribe, will be having in terms of, feeling a little bit different, and but yet having a goal or a dream or something you want to do. How tough it can be. And he talks about all the different things you have to go through. He says sleeping on a park bench, other people ignoring you, girlfriends leaving you. And then he talks about isolation. But he says, as what you just said, he says isolation is a gift. And it's funny, you think, it's not really a gift because I feel lonely. But then, yes, it is a gift because it gives you so much time to put into the projects that inspire you. So in some ways, it is useful to think of isolation as a gift. And plus, you don't have all this stupid you're separated from the system consciousness, which can drag
Yeah,
you
you're not
down.
influenced. You're
Yeah.
not influenced by thoughts of others and all this noise. Yeah,
Mm.
beautiful. I personally feel that this conversation that we are having is helping me as well. It's really it's beautiful. I'm very grateful that we're having this conversation, brother.
Oh, me too.
Everything.
Me too, Robin. It's fun. It's good.
Yeah. Let's see. What kind of questions can I still ask? Because most of the questions we've already spoke about. So I have a part with the digital age, building the new world, and then we have the outro. So let's do a small part of the digital age. So we live in a world of constant simulation and distraction. Has the prison become more sophisticated in the digital age, in your opinion?
Yes, that's interesting. It has, because pre-smartphones, what? Actually, let me say this: one of your greatest tools or the greatest tool you have for your personal freedom and living the life you want is your mind, your thoughts. But now what's happening is we're having that taken away from us because we have these smartphones, or because there's so much information, so many information streams constantly around us all of the time. We're having our number one tool for building the life we want taken away from us and muted. So that means you've got to be very conscious in the way that you detach from primarily your phone, but there are other information streams going on as well. Could be a laptop, could be Netflix, etc. Radio, even the radio. And it's not to say all of these things are bad things, because in some ways they're good. You and me connected via smartphones. That's good. You have this platform via smartphones. So in some way it's good, but you've got to be very conscious that you're not connecting too much and that you are having time alone with just your thoughts. Now, this could be thoughts, as you mentioned, for your business and what you want to do, or it can just be thoughts. It can be clearing your mind, just being present, or it could just be thoughts about how you want to move your life forwards to the next level. All of that is priming your subconscious to make it happen. Now, if you have that taken away from you, because when you're not at work, at work you're engaged doing your job, fine. But then when you're leaving work, you're then got, different YouTube channels on the whole time, listening to podcasts the whole time, which is okay, which is fine in some ways, but it stops you doing your own thinking, and that is really damaging, because it will disempower you. So in some ways, yeah, the prison has got more sophisticated because of all these devices and information overload.
Yeah, well, you actually answered my next question. That was, are social media platforms empowering people or conditioning them?
That's yeah, it's difficult. It's both, isn't it? It's both
Yeah.
because I don't like social media, yet at the same time I recognize that, these two books probably wouldn't exist without it, because um, I have one book which was published in the traditional way, but the rest of my books are self-published through Amazon. So as much as people may hate on Amazon, and justifiably so, it also gave me a platform to get my message out there. So it's difficult. So I would say I think it's possible to use social media for good, as long as you don't let it, you've got to set limits on the amount of time you're on your phone or
Yeah.
engaging with social. You have to do that, because otherwise it kind of rots your mind and your thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. More creating and less consuming.
Yeah.
And of course there is a balance. Like, we are creators and we also consume, especially when we consume knowledge to create, right? But I think for people in general, it's indeed important that they do not become a slave of all this unstoppable noise, because the feed never ends, right? You can keep
Mm.
on scrolling until you die, actually. And that's very dangerous. Yeah. Um, let's see. How does someone protect their mind in an age where attention has become a commodity?
So I mean, you have these apps, don't you, which can limit your on-screen time. What I do is I'm a big goal person, so I like to set myself goals. So I set myself a personal goal for the amount of screen time I'm allowed per day on my phone. This is not something I track with an app. I just look on the phone on the screen time, and I'll alone. Now, a lot of my work is done on the phone, so my use may be more than other people's, but I'll say 3 hours per day screen time is all I'm allowed. And if I'm getting close to that, then I can't go on Instagram and scroll. I can't go on X and look at people's pointless opinions. So I'll say, look, because it works for me, because I'm quite a goal-driven person, I like to be able to say I achieved my goals for the year. So that, to me, is some way of doing it. The other thing I'd say is you've got to be in nature. Go out in nature. Don't have your podcast on, unless you're listening to this one right now, of course. That's excusable. But any other reason, don't have your podcast on. Don't have your music on. Just walk around in nature, in the trees or mountain, if you live nearby them, and just listen to the sound of the birds. That again is a great way of disconnecting from all of this noise and the information overload.
Beautiful. And what are your thoughts on artificial intelligence? Very curious.
Again, we keep this good questions, Robin, because we keep coming up with these things which are both good and bad. Now, it really, I struggle with technology, so AI has really helped me when it comes to, if I need to get something done in terms of banking, or I need to get something done in terms of paying taxes. It tells me all the steps, and it's like, oh God, I really need this. This is so helpful. But then there's I don't know, that I think there could be a downside to it. It requires a huge amount of energy to operate, which is potentially an issue. And then there's the fact that a lot of people use it for their content, which again is okay sometimes. As a writer, I would never, all the books you see behind you, and any book I write will 100% be my work. But now I've started to, as in my writing, it's not AI doing the writing for me, but I will ask AI about certain concepts and ideas I have, and it will throw things back at me, which will give me, a useful thought or something to explore. So from that perspective, it's good. and it does write good articles. I go on Substack or Medium and I look at articles, and I can tell immediately whose is written by AI. It still sounds quite good, but then the problem is that everybody's content, both written content and YouTube videos, is starting to sound the same, because
Yeah,
it's
exactly. Yeah.
but that then gives the person who is still creating their own unique content a bit of an edge, because now all of a sudden you sound even more unique and different, because you're not using all of the ChatGTP isms that tend to be contained in articles and videos. So I'm quite excited by AI in some ways. I haven't researched it enough to know the dangers. I know Elon Musk used to talk a lot about the dangers of AI and what could potentially go wrong. My knowledge is not that strong in that, but I'm quite excited for it it's made me more efficient. I will say that much. So
Exactly, yes, I agree. It is our responsibility of how we use this technology, and what you just said about these videos, I see it, of course, because that's one of my main work points. It's one of my main focuses as a content creator, to see, also look at other one's content. And what I see is that there's a lack of authenticity,
yeah,
and that's something people feel when you are authentic in your videos, and you are really talking from yourself and even making mistakes when you talk or whatever. People can feel that, and that's something people will in the future, I believe, want to have more, because they will start to miss this human interaction, because that's also something I've done research on recently, is AI companionship. More and more young people, at least, go towards AI chatbots to have conversations with, instead of having conversations with real human beings. Because it is hard sometimes to have conversations with a human being who has feelings, right? And this chatbot will say everything wrapped in gold and softness, right? So yeah, it's interesting to observe. But yeah, authenticity is always the highest frequency in what we do. You as well, as a writer, I could feel that. I've read your book, Escape the System, 2 times. The first time to sort of discover, and the second time to really feel what you are saying. Yeah. So yeah.
Sorry, Robin, go on.
No worries. I was going to part 6, and that's the last chapter, and that's building a new world. So many people can identify what's broken. Far fewer can articulate what comes next. Do you believe humanity is entering a period of awakening?
Yes, but it's very difficult to. My perception of this has shifted, because I thought we were back at the turn of the millennium, 1999 to 2000, but then it's not materialized the way I thought it would. I thought we'd be much further along the line to this awakening to a new consciousness and society in 2026 than we are. In some ways, I feel we're more trapped. It's hard to tell. So I am optimistic. I do think we are heading more towards an awakening, but then we're getting sidetracked with other issues, non-important issues as well.
Sort of to stall us, or whether it seems.
Well, I mean, I'll be controversial now, but for example, I'm a big believer that everybody should have rights. Everybody should be treated the same. But for example, like the trans issue, to me, is a non-issue. Why are we getting sidetracked with this? Why is it taking up so much airtime? Why is this? It's almost, as you say, like it's being programmed on us that this is important. yeah, I don't want to, put down anybody who feels that they are in the wrong body. But I don't. Let's be realistic. It's a very minor issue. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny minority of people who feel that way. It shouldn't be getting the airtime that it is. So that to me, and there are many other issues like that. It's not just that. Sidetrack us from actually what's really important and why we aren't maybe experiencing the awakening that we should be and moving forwards. Or maybe, there's another way of looking at this, Robin. You mentioned war and that we're heading for something quite bad at the moment. But what would come out of that, the other side, is something, a greatly improved world and a freer society. So I'm just a little confused. I think it could go a number of different ways at the moment. I think it's very open right now as to what direction we can go.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And the whole trans thing, woke agenda, that's all distraction for sure. Yeah, to keep people occupied. But we don't have that kind of viewers here, don't we, butterflies? Okay, let's see. And what trends give you hope? We can be short if you want, because
Yeah, sure.
I've
And
been
what
having you
trends give
for
me
half
hope?
an hour.
What gives me hope actually goes back to what we were talking earlier, is that there is now a space for people like you and me. We were trying to do this 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Our voices may not be heard, but now
Yeah.
there is a space. People are listening to more and more voices like ours. So that gives me a lot of hope that this message, or the different messages out there, you and me, our message may not be exactly the same, but we're part of the same light that's coming out there
It's
into
the
the
same
world.
frequency. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So that we can be heard and have this kind of dialogue is definitely gives me hope.
Yeah, awesome. What would society look like if more people became sovereign?
I think it would look so much better because we wouldn't have so much control. Control occurs over us because we don't question things, because we don't claim our sovereignty. So if everybody started claiming their sovereignty, we wouldn't have the hierarchy that we have as well. There's a tremendous hierarchy in society, and to some extent that's natural. You do have natural leaders, but I think the hierarchy we have is too overbearing. At the end of the day, we are all just people, and we should be treated as equals, and no one is more special than another person. But I find that we live in a world where very much it's seen that some people are more special and important than other people, and that's not true. And if we all claimed our sovereignty, we would have this tribe. We would go back to being tribe, not in the sense that we might live in the caves again, but in the sense that everybody is, no one person is more special than another.
Yeah, I myself have had the inspiration through meditation and also just by being on this journey to see what kind of problems can I solve for my people. And so I am creating an application in which I want to bring together like-minded people all over the world to get them through a transformation about all the things we've talked about during this episode, and then bring them together. So first they have to transform into, let's say, the butterfly, and when they are a butterfly, they can then start connecting and start building a kingdom within that application that I'm building. And that also goes paired with financial independence, etc., and literacy. So yeah, very excited for that. And what responsibility do entrepreneurs, creators, and thought leaders have in shaping the future?
I think, I think we have that responsibility to keep sharing our truth, our message, and not be silenced. You mentioned you had a lot of criticism or backlash in Holland when you did your
Yeah.
interviews. It's your responsibility now to not let that stop you. You've got to keep going with what you're doing, despite the criticism you might face. So that's our responsibility, is to keep speaking our truths and reaching as many people as we can so that they can speak their truth as well. And that butterfly effect occurs, and it spreads.
Yeah, and the community helps us as well, like the positive comments are like 10 times more impactful than the hateful comments, right? So that's how we help each other, and that's the beauty of community, from my experience. What advice would you give someone listening right now who feels trapped in a life they never consciously chose?
Okay, this is a good question. So I would say, number one, look at your belief system. Try to see if there are these beliefs, these negative beliefs, are trapping you, because it goes back to what I said earlier. When I shifted one of my beliefs to the world is full of opportunity, I started to see that opportunity and realize that I wasn't so trapped. The other thing I tell them to do is try to listen to your spirit, what it's telling you, because it probably will present you with ideas for a way out if you're feeling trapped. But you've got to listen to it, and you can't let the societal noise take over. You've got to silence that voice and try to discover what your inspiration is telling you what things are making you feel inspired. Why is it that you like this particular book you've read? Or why is it that you're following this guy on social media and he seems to resonate with you for some reason? Well, what's the hidden message in that? Or why is it that you use AI to research certain things? What is it about them that fascinates you? Can you find a way out and freedom through, following up on that, and then maybe adding something to that or creating something in that direction? So try and be aware of what your feelings and your spirit is telling you.
Beautiful, beautiful advice. Thank you, brother. I have one last question. If you could leave humanity with one principle to live by, what would it be?
I think right now, it would be ask questions. Don't just take for granted what you're told by institutions, by authority figures. I'd say question authority figures and challenge what they're saying.
Question everything.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you for joining us today. What I really appreciate about your work is that it doesn't simply criticize the system, it challenges people to take responsibility for their own lives. Because ultimately, sovereignty isn't something granted by governments, institutions, employers, or circumstances. It begins the moment we stop outsourcing our thinking and start consciously choosing who we become. For everyone listening, if today's conversation resonated with you, I highly recommend checking out Joe Barnes' book, Escape the System, and exploring his work further. And remember, the greatest prison is often invisible. The greatest revolution is internal. And the path to freedom begins the moment you question the script you've been handed. You wanted to share a detail, I remember, about your book.
So for the Butterfly Tribe, I got my book here, Escape the System. So this is the paperback version, obviously. I can't give a discount on this, but I have discounted the Kindle version, the electronic version. So for Butterfly Tribe members, I will share a link with you, Robin, and they can get that digital version of the book for just $1, $1 only. I'll probably do that for a week after this interview, this podcast is published. I'll keep the price low for a week, and anyone who wants to grab a copy can. If they prefer the physical, I know some people like to hold it and read it. It's still on Amazon for a good price, and I'll share the link. And If anyone wants to follow up more on my work, my website is escapethesystemnow.com. You can read some of my blog posts, hear a little bit about the background, and see any of the other books you might be interested in. But Robin, it was a pleasure to talk with you, and I love your questions, man. You got me thinking about some things, and hopefully we got some good answers.
It was an honor as well, and I will make sure to put all the details underneath this video for our tribe members. Until next time, stay curious, stay sovereign, and keep becoming who you were meant to become. Sincerely yours, Robin, like the bird, the voice of sovereignty.